Afternoon, welcome. Hi everyone. Welcome. Welcome. Lovely to see you all. Good afternoon. Let me just let everybody in. Get myself all set up. Welcome to those of you just joining. All right, we are going to jump straight in. I was just thinking actually when I start a teaching space, either online or in person with in Bhakti Rose in my yoga and Ayurveda business, I like to do a nice gentle start and we sort of meditate and orient ourselves and get grounded and what have you. And I just noticed this morning that I very often don't do that in the business trainings. And I think the reason is that I just feel that I have so much I want to share with you. It's like I enter the room already running because there's just so much that I want to, get over to you. And I have a lot of energy and enthusiasm for this work. It's exciting. And I've been able to have a one-to-one session with quite a number of you now, which is wonderful, and really start to get an insight into your businesses, which is, I'm just loving that. I really, really love the balance of group work and one-to-one. And I'm so genuinely inspired by the work that you guys are doing. Like you're really you really have some strong visions. And I think what's particularly for me, what stands out about this group in particular, which is something I've really been wanting to see more of, is that many of you have got quite clear ideas about what you want to do and quite a clear niche, or I don't even really love that word niche because it implies something that's quite limiting, but you've got an offering that feels unique. You've got an offering that feels that it has a certain flavor or tone that is coming from you. And I'm seeing that from a lot of you. And that's what tends to make the difference between something selling and not selling. It's like people connect to the feeling of the thing. And it could be you as a person, or it could be several different modalities that you have that you've combined into one. There's different ways that that can kind of look, but it's that feeling of something that you've poured your heart and soul into. And it's often the thing that feels a bit wacky. Sometimes it's a thing where you go, well, I do this and I do that, and I've sort of got this idea to bring them together, but it's a bit weird and I'm not sure. And that's often the gold, where you find the intersection of your own particular interests and flavor, and then other people that have those same interests and that same kooky flavor come along and they're the perfect fit. And the thing about doing that is you do get your perfect fit clients. So rather than sort of this generic thing of trying to be something to everybody, but then no one really feels like they've been like fully received. So yeah, I'm seeing a lot of that in this group, and it's really exciting for me. So we're going to continue our journey today into looking at your free offering, sometimes also known as a lead magnet or an opt-in, and then this pathway through into low cost offering, potentially signature offering. A couple of you who I've spoken to already are going to be bypassing low cost and going to something that's more like a mid-range, and that's fine too. Like you don't have to clinically follow the pathway exactly. I would definitely, for everybody, I mean, I honestly cannot think of a single business where having no free opt-in is a good idea. I don't think in this day and age in business, it's just not easy to get people through the door and ask them to immediately pay. It's possible, and some people do run their businesses like that. My strong recommendation is get them in for free. And I was using the analogy this morning of an ice cream shop. So imagine that you open an ice cream store. Your Instagram is your A board outside the door. So, people are walking down the street, they're just in their own world, and you stop them with a little A board ad board that says delicious ice cream. Immediately they're like, oh, delicious ice cream. Okay, so they're interested. Now, maybe you step out onto the street and you start handing out little free samples of ice cream. That's your freebie. That's your opt-in. Or maybe you're asking them, could you please step inside to the shop and I'll be happy to give you a sample. So perhaps your A board, your Instagram, or your could be Facebook, or YouTube. I mean, there's other options, brings them into the store, And there you give them a free sample. Try the ice cream. And then after that, they love the ice cream and they purchase one for all their friends and family. So that's a nice analogy to think about this freebie. It's not that you're devaluing what you do or that you're giving away too much. You don't give them a giant, great ice cream sundae for free. You give them a little sample, but they still get to try it. And they're in the shop and the shop feels beautiful and it's professional and everyone's friendly and there's an ambience and a feeling. And all of a sudden, they're sitting down enjoying an ice cream when a moment ago they were just walking down the street, right? So it's this idea of we don't really sell so much through Instagram or social media, but we do need to capture people's attention and bring them in. We bring them in with the offer of something lovely and free. And in that freebie, we really create the mood. We really there's like a palpable feeling of what it is that we're offering. And that mood might be very yogic and it might be very much like the vibe of what you're offering, but it could also be like, for example, Jodie's going to be creating an offering that gives people, yoga teachers starting out in business, a checklist about accounting and bookkeeping. So the mood of that is going to be organized, easy to understand, clear. Like your mood, the mood doesn't have to be like, let's say you were a yoga teacher that focused on working with injuries. The mood of your freebie would be, I can help you. I have knowledge and skill set that is really useful for you, you know? This week I purchased some tutoring for my son who is dyslexic, and I purchased some specific dyslexia oriented tutoring for him. And I had a couple of options that I was weighing up of which one I would purchase. And I liked both tutors equally. They both seemed really good. They were both well qualified. But one of them was just really good at explaining what he did and how he worked. Like I really understood his whole philosophy, whereas the other one didn't really take the time. He just assured me that he would do a good job and I could trust him. And I, if he'd been my only option, I'm sure I would have gone with him. But the guy that took the time to say, this is the method, this is how we work, this is what we do if they lose focus, really walked me through it. Straight away, it was a yes from me because I felt safe. I felt the mood, the feeling of this guy is well organized. He has a strategy. I'm being held here. So that's what we want to really get across, the taste of the ice cream. Today, we're going to think about our offers as their own little branded entities, their own little sort of sub pieces of your business. Now, I know for those of you who are really new and you're just starting out, this might be a bit overwhelming, and it also might not necessarily even be that relevant for all of you. But it's really useful to think within your business of specific offerings that you're doing as having their own identity. So I'm going to take Sue as an example. And actually, Sue's brand new. So this is a good example because it is very relevant to her, even though she's quite new in business. Her overall business name, her umbrella, Gratitude Flows. Have I remembered that right?
Yeah.
I'm impressed with my own memory. And she'll be running a few different things underneath that banner. But within that, she's creating a signature one-to-one offering that includes massage, sound bowl healing, and Reiki, if I've remembered correctly. It's her own unique thing. So for that offering that she's going to create, I would recommend she creates a brand identity for that offering. So it would have its own name and it would have its own elevator pitch. And it would also probably have its own specific audience. And because it's an in-person offering, it's going to be people who live in a reasonable drive of XYZ place. Let's take Rachel as another example. So Rachel has many different offerings. She runs yoga retreats, she runs teacher training, she runs all kinds of different things, but she's creating a membership for yogis oriented around Sanskrit and sound. right? So that membership, if it's a membership model or however she decides to sell it, could be a course, but it's yoga, sound, Sanskrit. It's got its own little spirit soul. It's its own entity under the umbrella of Ray of Light, which is her overall business. So I would invite Rachel to think about creating a name for that offering, even specific branding around colors or imagery. I often use a photo. Like one of the most successful launches I've ever done was a session called Lakshmi Codes, and it was teachings on the goddess Lakshmi that I did over 3 days live for free. And then it opted into my Bhakti Club membership. It was one of the best launches I've ever done. And the whole Lakshmi codes, I actually put a lot of time and energy into planning the content for that. And it was quite academic and, really grounded in the philosophy of Lakshmi as a deity. But the branding of it was a pair of earrings. It was a gold pair of earrings with like rubies in on a beautiful tabletop. It was a photograph. And there was actually a story that linked earrings and ornament to Lakshmi. So it wasn't just completely irrelevant, but it was fairly irrelevant. Like the obvious thing would be a picture of, Lakshmi, the goddess. This pair of earrings, first of all, I just got so many messages and questions about where can I get the earrings, and I was like, you can't get the earrings. I've had them for 20 years. They're not. I don't even know where I got them. But also, an immediate, like, people immediately knew that it was this offering. It was like a visual anchor. And I know that Edwina has been talking to you guys about this. It could be a mug, it could be a photo, it could be a place in nature, it could be an item of clothing. But it's like something that just is evocative of the feeling or the mood of that particular offering. And what it does is it will really help you as well to create a sense that there are different things in your business that have different purposes. So, for example, if you're running a teacher training program, that has its own look and feel. If you're running a one-off workshop, that has its own look and feel. Like you're actually creating sort of energetic containers for your offerings. Now, if you're very new and they're right at the beginning, it's probably all going to be under the one umbrella. It's just going to be enough, like that's enough to think about, just one set of colors and branding and what have you. But as you grow, I really want to just put this out there now as something to think about. And I'm looking at each of you, and as I'm thinking of your businesses, I can see how this applies. Like Gemma, for example, has her whole entire business with lots of bits and pieces happening, but she's launching an app. So that app it's like children. It's like one of your babies, So the app is one of her children. It's one of her babies, and it has its own identity, its own look and feel, its own brand presence, right? Another thing I think is really lovely about doing this, that really putting words to each of your offerings, is it helps you have clarity in your business and in your pathway and what it is that you're doing. And it also helps you to not connect your whole identity with the things that you're offering. So sometimes, especially if we're the face of our business, we can kind of feel like, it's all on me. And if it's popular, then that's on me. And if it's unpopular, then that's like, I feel bad. Like if people don't sign up, I take it very personally. Whereas when you create a container outside of yourself, you can be a little bit less attached to either grasping for sales or disappointment if you don't get exactly the numbers that you wanted. It's like it's its own little entity, like a child that you love and nurture and care for and want to be successful, but also recognize it's not you. Your business isn't you. And some of its success and failure is just tied up in karma and luck and things that you don't get to control, like so many elements of our lives. So it's really important that we don't connect our successes and failures with our own sense of self-worth. Really, really important. Your self-worth is pristine, regardless of whether or not you're successful as a business person, which doesn't mean we don't do the best we can to nurture our babies, but we also have a sense of self beyond that that doesn't get so affected by the ups and downs. And those of you who are parents know this analogy actually works really well with children as well. Like, you're not entirely responsible for the way that your children turn out. You're partially responsible and you're hopeful that it will be great, but they are also their own beings traveling through the world. And so it is with your business and the parts of your business. So I hope that's helpful and not too esoteric. It's actually something I find really, really useful in my work to have that clarity. Today I want to talk a bit about pricing, and I'm going to invite you for your homework today to watch a video inside the portal, which is on money mindset. I interviewed a woman called Ray Dodd, who is a brilliant, brilliant money tutor and coach, and I really like her work. I think that she has a lot of clarity and also is very down to earth, and she works in the online space, so she understands this world. So I'd like you to watch that video. And there's also, under the ARTA module in the portal, a numbers mind map exercise. And this touches on what we spoke about in our last session, which has to do with setting goals in your business that you are in control of, and also setting goals in your business that you cannot control. So an example of a goal that you cannot control is how many people sign up for a particular program. But an example of a goal that you can control is that you have the website page for that program ready and you send it out to your database by a certain date. So those are things that we absolutely are in control of. I know that sometimes when you're working on your own and especially if you're not used to being self-employed, it's really easy to get sort of swallowed up with procrastination and overwhelm and learn lots of things, but not action lots of things. And I want to really strongly encourage you, if you haven't already started at this point in the program, I want you to be starting to actually make something and do stuff in your business. Like, get your Instagram page up and running, start creating a website, start mapping out content for an offering. What I don't want is for you to get through the training and have learned a whole lot of theory, but not be actually applying it, because then you just have to come back and do it all again and watch all the videos again and like go through it, because you'll forget as well. So let's do this in real time. And as you do it in real time, you'll also be getting feedback and moving through the journey with the group and actually getting the results. So if you've got a feeling of like desiring to procrastinate, or if you're telling yourself something like, well, I'll just do the training and then I'll go back and I'll set up the website and I'll go back and I'll think about, creating my course or whatever, I really want to encourage you again just to flip that on its head and start and just actually start creating something. It won't be perfect in the beginning. It won't be exactly the way you want it to be, but a start is better than just lots of ideas floating around. So hopefully by now you've got a bit of an idea of your pyramid or your funnel, which is how people are coming in, what you're offering them next, and then what you're ultimately going to be able to offer them. So it's the range of your products or your services and the pathway through those. And we've talked a lot about the clarity of that pathway being very linear. And I feel like most of you are very much on track with that. So today we're going to talk about pricing. If you've read We Should All Be Millionaires, Rachel Rodgers, which is a book I recommend, you'll know that she basically says pretty much anyone in the entrepreneurial space or the online space or the coaching space, especially women, need to just straight up double their prices. So that's where she's coming from. I think that's a bit extreme. It's a little bit like full on. But I do know that in general, these types of groups tend towards undercharging. And when it comes to what you're charging, there's a couple of ways of thinking about this. You can go for bigger numbers at a lower cost, or you can go for bigger numbers of people at a lower cost, or you can go for smaller numbers of people and charge them a lot of money. So like from with me, I'm somewhere in the middle of that, but I'm more oriented towards larger numbers at lower cost. That feels good for me. I like this is the most expensive thing I sell, this program that you're on right now. And I give it a lot of my time and energy, and it's very high touch. Like I genuinely feel like you get your money's worth because you get a lot of my like, trust me, I'm thinking about you guys even when I'm not talking to you. Your businesses are very much in my mind, and I'm holding that space, and I'm midwifing you through this process, both practically and energetically. But that's pretty much the most high touch thing that I offer. Um, Almost everything else I offer, things like my Bhakti Club or uh, one-off workshops, other smaller trainings. They're lower cost, but I have quite big numbers coming through, which means I have a fairly large database. Like I've got several thousand people on my database, and most of what I sell is not expensive. Um, there are a few exceptions. Another exception is the India retreat. We take people to India, but that's expensive because it costs, the outgoings for that are high. You might position yourself in a more sort of premium way where you only need a handful of clients and that's your entire income for the year taken care of. And you work very closely with them and it's quite high touch. That's definitely an option. And, people do that. Or you might have something that's really low cost and you need lots and lots and lots of people to do it. My recommendation would be you want to be somewhere in the middle. So you don't want to have a $20 thing that you have to sell to thousands of people to make the annual income that you desire. On the other hand, selling something that's $10,000 to three or four people, that's hard going. That's going to be its own challenge. Sweet spot in the middle is probably what we're looking for. And we also don't want to devalue our hourly rate or what we're charging in terms of how it adds up for the amount of time. So let's take, for example, doing something like giving a massage or teaching a yoga class. You cannot just factor in the 1 hour that you're massaging or teaching. You have to think about travel time. You have to think about admin time. You have to think about class planning time. Perhaps you're also having conversations in your DMs or in your, on WhatsApp with your students before or after, or with your clients. Maybe you follow up. Perhaps you make recommendations and suggestions. All of that time is what it costs you to run a session. And usually an hour is at least 2 hours, if not more like 3 or 4. So for every 1 hour yoga class you teach, it's actually 2 hours of your time. For every 1 hour naturopathy session that you give, it's 2 or 3, depending if there's travel time as well. So when you're thinking about your hourly rate, I want you to factor that in. I also want you to factor in that these are things to think about with pricing, that very often people will not choose the cheaper option if it's too cheap because they will imagine that it's not high quality. I'll give you an example. And Rachel knows about this because I spoke to her about this. When I ran Bhakti Women's Summit, for years and years, the recordings were $97, right? So you get the whole bundle of all the summit recordings for $97. And they sold really well, and I made good income from that. The summit is free, but if you want the recordings, you pay. It's $97 and you get the full bundle of recordings. Worked really well. One year, I think it was 2023, if I'm remembering correctly, I could have that wrong. I had the great idea that I'd make it much cheaper and I'd sell a lot more of the recordings. So I bought it down to $27, right? And I thought I'm going to sell hundreds, because if I sold this many at $97, I'll sell 10 times more at $27. And my thinking was I'll make just as much money, but I'll serve more people, because 97 is, some people can't afford $97, right? This was my logic. And I'd run it successfully at 97 for several years and made several $1,000s. Put it in at 27, sold half the amount I normally sold at 97 for the same thing. Like it was the same thing. I just brought the price down and I was so perplexed. But what I realized is when it was $97, people had a perception of the value that, oh, this is a really good thing and it's worth $97. That's a reasonable price. And I want the recordings and I'm going to pay, right? When it was 27, it was suspiciously cheap. It was like it didn't have the same weight to it. It didn't feel of the same value. And so people didn't buy. So actually cheaper is definitely not always better, and people will prioritize what they think is not necessarily cheap. Some people will always go cheapest. That's, some people, but most people will prioritize what they think is a fit for the value of what they're getting. And what I notice more and more is that people are very happy to pay if they're going to get exactly the thing they want. Like when I signed up for my son's tutoring, I had a list. I wanted someone who specialized in dyslexia. I wanted someone who was local. I wanted a man because I knew that he would relate better, my son. Um, I had a checklist, and honestly, price wasn't on that list. Like if he'd been extortionate and ridiculous, I'd have been like, okay, whoa, this isn't, we're not in the same ballpark. But if he's 20 or $30 more per hour here or there over the next person, but he's answering he is the thing I want, I don't care that it's a little bit more expensive. And too cheap is sometimes suspicious. In line with that, it's really important that we don't project our own money stories onto the stories of our customers and clients. And I noticed this in myself. I've had times in my life where I've had very, very little money, particularly when I got newly divorced. I call it my rice and lentils era, where, I really had to budget for the weekly groceries and I had to plan to be able to pay the rego on my car. And paying for Kajabi was enormous expense for me every month. And slowly, I've worked my way into a much more comfortable place. But when I was in that era, I had a lot of stuff come up about how much I was charging people because I knew that for me, that was expensive. Right? It felt like, oh, that's a lot of money. Like, oh, you know, not remembering or thinking about all the people for whom that is not a lot of money. It's peanuts actually. Um, so if you have stuff around sort of if I can't afford it, no one can afford it, or if it feels like a lot to me, then it's a lot to everybody. I really want to invite you to just work into that a little bit and let go of it a little bit. And just remember that people will prioritize financially what is important for them. And what's much more important, and this is now I'm going to get to the pricing thing that I actually want to say, is that the price that you charge feels aligned for you, that you can back it, that it feels in your body like the right price. And you'll know because if you're charging too little, you'll feel like I'm giving too much here, and you'll feel a little hint of the martyr or the this is a strong word. I don't mean victim, but you'll feel a little bit of like, oh, I'm over giving, even resentment, just like a thread of resentment, right? Versus when you overinflate your price, you charge too much and you feel like, is this really worth it? Not is it good enough, because that is often not connected to pricing. That's just connected to you kind of stepping into worthiness, but just a feeling of like it feels like too much. I don't feel comfortable with this, right? There's a sweet spot and there's a guided little process in the portal that I take you through to actually really feel, and you'll feel it in your body, and you can almost play with the number. You know, you like, let's say you're putting on a training and it's like, okay, should I charge should I charge $100? Should I charge $150? Should I charge 200? And then you just sort of sit in stillness and you feel into the amount, and you'll really get a sense for it. Like you'll actually start to feel what feels calibrated. And that's how I recommend you create your pricing. What I don't recommend you do is go online and see what everyone else is doing, because there is enormous, enormous variety. I'm sure you've noticed. Some people are giving away far too much for free or very low cost. Some people are selling for extortionate amounts of money, fairly empty, you know, stuff that isn't really, they haven't put a lot of thought into content. I strongly recommend that you deeply invest your time and energy in your content so you feel that it's really good and you feel that you can back yourself and you feel confident. And then your pricing reflects that. Another thing that's good to think about with pricing is, will it be recurring or is it a one-off? So something like a membership model, like my Bhakti Club, is $50 a month, but it's recurring revenue. So I'm getting a fairly stabilized income from that, versus just charging a big chunk at the beginning. And then once it's finished, it's finished. If you are going to be doing higher ticket items like retreats, more in-depth trainings, then you definitely want to think about payment plans. So what I'm noticing is that it's not that people can't afford things or aren't signing up for things, but I'm definitely noticing at the moment, because we are in leaner times, a lot of people are really challenged with the cost of living, is I've definitely seen an increase in people on payment plan versus paying in full. And one thing I did in my business, just on the topic of pricing a couple of years ago, is it used to be that you pay more if you're on a payment plan, which is sort of industry standard. Everyone seems to do that. And they say admin costs. I realized that wasn't ethical. That wasn't sitting well for me, because what I realized is the people on payment plan are the people that don't actually have the money to pay up front. So, if you're wealthy and you've got the money to pay up front, you benefit. And if it's like with power bills, they charge you more to pay off your water or your power or your green slip or whatever in installments. It's so wrong because it's penalizing the people that don't have the upfront money. I'm really actually ethically, when I properly sat and thought about it, I was like, this is not in alignment with my values in my business. So I changed it. I don't charge more for payment plans now, because, it's not fair. There are a couple of exceptions to that, where there are things where I'll have an outlay in the beginning and I need income to come in. Like, for example, our India retreat, we have to pay all the hotels, we have to pay all the drivers in advance. So we get the money in, hopefully by incentivizing people to pay up front. And then the people on payment plan pay a little bit more. But there's a logical financial reason for that. It's not just me deciding if you're on a payment plan, you have to pay a bit more. That's a personal take, but it's an example of how something felt in my body. I was like, it doesn't feel right to penalize the people who are on a payment plan. So I'm going to honor that. It's like intuitive pricing, like we're working a lot with intuition here, and I think it's a really helpful way. I've put some journaling prompts. I will put some journaling prompts in with this recording for you. And some of those prompts that I want you to think about in your own time are, what is your hourly rate? So think about what your hourly rate might be for seeing someone for a one-to-one session versus teaching a class versus showing up for a full day workshop, that kind of thing. And you want to have them roughly be the same. And you also want to think about hourly rate in terms of prep time and, like I just said before, travel time and also follow-up time. These things are all relevant. So, for example, if someone asks me to teach on a teacher training program for them, which I do a fair bit of, I have an hourly rate. But if they also want me to create content, then they have to pay me for that time as well, right? Versus just, can you come in and teach on this subject? Here's the handout. This is the content. This is what we want you to cover. That doesn't require too much of my uh, intellectual property. But if they want me to write a handout or a workbook or something like that, well, that's a whole other thing. So thinking about how your time, it can blow up very quickly to be a lot more time. You think, oh, it's just an hour a week or it's just an hour a fortnight. Actually, no, it's a lot more than that. If you haven't already looked at your incoming and outgoing, this week would be the right time to do that. For those of you that did cash flow and clarity, which was the lead in to this accelerator, we started inviting you to look at that, but I would definitely recommend look at that again. And if you're someone that tends to have your head in the sand a bit around finances and just kind of like not look, this week would be an invitation to look, because the very first step to improving things is to know what your starting point is, to get clear. And there's some magic that happens, and I cannot tell you, I'll never understand this, but I've seen it happen again and again and again in my business. When you set a numbers goal, it works magic. Like the number of times I've said to myself, I want 15 people in this training, or I want 20 people in this training, and that's the number I get. This training is a perfect example. 20 people. We're actually on 21 because Chrissy snuck in yesterday, which I'm delighted about. But it's like I got the exact number. It filled up. And I had a couple of people, I wouldn't say I turned them away, but I had a couple of people coming at the last minute that were a bit vague. And I was like, look, we'll run it again later in the year. But it's like you open the portal, you create a container when you set that number. One of the things I love to do, I always remember Annika, who runs Nin Yoga in Penrith. She did this training in the first round that I ever ran it. And it was the first time she was transitioning into running her own teacher training. And I said to her, how many people do you want in your teacher training? And she said, oh, I don't know. Maybe, she's very humble, maybe 8, maybe 10. And I was like, come on, Annika, you can do more than that. She's got a very established yoga studio. So we got to 16. I stretched her and we got to 16. And she went out and she bought 16 little polished crystals, like rose quartz or something, crystals. And she got a beautiful bowl. And the practice was every time someone signs up, you take one of your crystals and you pop it in the bowl. And she kept it on her altar. So it's such a beautiful ritual of intention setting. Like I've already energetically, I'm holding space for these beautiful people to come into my retreat or my workshop or my freebie. It doesn't even have to be a paid thing. Like the first 10 people that are going to sign up for my freebie, I'm going to envision them and call them in and see it happening, see it as already done, and set that intention of that number. And it could be a very humble number. It could be 10 people for a free offering. What a beautiful start that 10 people are ready to come and be in sacred space with you and learn from you. But when we have the numbers, some magic happens where it's like we put it out there and the universe, spirit hears us, and the people start magically doing their thing and coming into our space, even though we don't know that that's happening until they sign up or email or whatever it might be. Okay, and then the last little piece on the notes before we open up, and I'll open up for questions, is this is just a thought experiment, and this may not be useful for some of you, especially those of you at the very beginning. This probably isn't very useful, but for some of you it will be. If I told you that you have to double your income in a month in your business, what would you do? So if I just said to you, next month, you've got to double whatever you're doing right now, and it's like, I've got a gun to your head, you've got to do this. How would you do it? It's a very useful thought experiment, because what that will show you is the low-hanging fruit. It'll show you what you could be doing that you're probably, or it'll also show you where you're complicating things. So you don't have to do any of the things that you come up with, but I really want to invite you to just maybe set a timer for 10 minutes, get a blank sheet of paper and brainstorm. You have to double your income in a month. It's a non-negotiable. How are you going to do this? Very interesting way to just think about your business. And, some of the ideas that come out of that might be usable and quite helpful. So I'll pop those journaling prompts and those little bits of homework into the chat, into the notes that go with the recording. But for now, what I really want to invite you to be thinking about this week is pricing. You've got your pathway, hopefully. You're getting clearer on your offers. I want you, with Edwina, to be thinking about branding, not only just for your whole business, but also for your individual unique offerings. And then we start to get clear on pricing. And I spoke about this last time. I'm going to repeat myself because I think it's important. In the same way that you sit down in a very deliberate, mindful, and meditative space to map out what your offerings are going to be, and then map out what your pathway of your business will look like, and then you stick to it. Remember last time I said maybe you do the planning, you go to bed, you sleep on it overnight, you come back, you look again, but at some point you go, okay, this is what I'm doing, and you don't keep chopping and changing. Same with pricing. I maybe change my prices. I actually very rarely change my prices, to be honest, but like I review them probably every 6 months, and maybe tweak a little bit, but I don't chop and change. I'm pretty set. And that's because I've done the nervous system work of feeling okay with my pricing. The time that you'll be tempted to change your pricing a lot will be when you haven't found the sweet spot. But at some point, you just got to commit and just say to yourself, okay, I'm committing for 6 months. And then we'll see. And one last piece to say on pricing. No matter what you charge, like literally no matter what you charge, there will be people who think that you are expensive and there will be people who think that you are cheap. So, there are lots of people out there that think all yoga and all spiritual content should be completely free. And I kind of also feel in an ideal world it would be available at least to everyone. And then there are people that pay thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to yoga teachers. When I worked at Try Yoga in London, we had lots of celebrity clients, and celebrity clients mostly like to have one-to-one teachers because they don't like to go to do public classes, especially the A-list celebrities. And they pay their yoga teachers extremely well. Like, that it's yeah. So what an hour of your time is worth is whatever you say it is. And whether people have an opinion about that or not, they're entitled to their opinion, but that should not impact whether or not you change your prices. The only thing that is relevant to your pricing is how it feels for you. All right. Karen is saying that when she's deciding prices, she has a spreadsheet. She types in the figures with different price levels, then revisits over a day or three. Eventually, there's one that feels right. I love that. I love that. So that's exactly what I'm talking about, but just with a spreadsheet. I just kind of do it up here, but it's useful to have it written down and just, yeah, feel into it. That's really helpful. Okay, let's open up. We've got 15 minutes. I'd love to hear any questions on anything so far. We can go in any direction. So anything you'd like clarified, anything you'd like to share. You might want to share where you're at and tell us how you're going. Feel free to unmute yourself. I'm going to put some lip balm on while I wait for someone to jump in. Especially if there's anyone who hasn't yet had a one-to-one with me, you might want to jump in because it would be great to just touch base and feel into how you're going.
Katie, I might go. I was just looking at my pyramid. I've got more levels because I was so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 levels. So I've got my free offerings. Then I've got my group like yoga classes and crystal bowls. Then I've got my one-on-one crystal bowls Reiki sessions. Then I've got my signature, and then my dream wish goal is half day and full day retreats and eventually overseas ones. But that's kind of out in a little cloud on the side.
Yeah.
Is that okay to have an extra tier or two in there? Because
Yes and no. It's okay because I can see your logic. I'm completely following along with you. The part of it that's not okay is I always want you, especially in the beginning, to keep going back to keeping it simple.
Yeah.
Like, how can I simplify? How can I simplify? And often when we're building something out for the first time, it gets so complex. I remember the first time I did the exercise of mind mapping out all my offerings with my business coach. Um, and she had me write it all out, and it was like a spider's web of confusion. And then I had to slowly just like cull it down, cull it down, cull it down. Um, I mean, your personal pathway, it's okay, Sue. Like it's pretty clear. I get it, but I don't want you to add any more. You're right, you're teetering on the brink. I
Mm.
think it's just because the more it just it's so easy to go, oh, and this, oh, and this, oh, and this. And before you know it, you've diluted the energy and the pathway is no longer a pathway.
Yeah.
It's too confusing. So I think
Yeah.
you're okay. I think you're okay, but just keep asking that simplification question and don't add any more.
Okay.
Also, because your signature is not yet in existence, but you know you want to get there, that makes sense to me too. So you're building up the pathway. It's more of a ladder than a pyramid. And you know
Yeah.
where you want to go, but it's just going to take a bit of time for that.
Yeah. And it was
Good
more like a
question.
mind dump of everything. And so maybe I can do a second one where I take off the wishful stuff and just
Yeah,
do
that's
what
great.
would
That's a
be the
really good
first.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. So have your aspirational one, and that's brilliant. Keep that because you want that, but then also have your what's actually happening right now. That's not a bad idea at all.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Chrissy.
Hey, nice to be here. I realized I was watching the online success instead of the last two things. I'm a bit behind, but that's okay. I'm here now. So one question is there a good number of offerings to have? Because I think we've already mentioned that I've got so many things in my head. Going at the same time, I guess.
Yeah, well, I think honestly, my one of my coaches, Kelly Deals, who I've worked with, for years now, and I love her. She says, and Rachel Rogers says the same, one offering. Like Rachel Rogers, if you watch her videos on Instagram again and again and again and again, she says, unless you're making, I think, 1 million, she says, unless you're turning over $1 million a year, you want one offering and one pathway because it gives you all your focus and you get known for that thing. Now, I can't do that. I'm too multi-passionate and too excited, and, so I totally get that that's not attainable for most of us. But I am constantly in my business trying to dial it in
Mm.
rather than add ideas. And I strongly recommend the same for you guys. Because all that happens if you have lots of offerings is your energy just goes like this and you
Yeah.
never really scale one thing. Whereas if you have one thing, it really just gets to exponentially grow. Um, and there are so many good examples of that of really successful online business owners. Two off the top of my head, Katie Silcox, who runs Shakti School, which is a very successful Ayurveda training in America, multi-millionaire, self-made multi-millionaire, sells one training and she runs one round of it every year. She's done it for nearly 10 years now. Each year it gets bigger, more popular. It's not cheap. She runs one training once a year and she's a multi-millionaire because she's completely focused. And she has a podcast and she has, little workshops and things she does, but they're all feed in to her one training. She doesn't really do other stuff. Another good example is a money mindset coach, Denise Duffield Thomas, who has a money mindset program, multi-millionaire, highly successful online offerings, one program. It's about money mindset. Like it's really just focus and also getting known for that one thing. At the beginning of this year, I tried to discipline myself and I was like, because at the moment, my Ayurveda training and my prenatal training are both, I'm re-recording them. So they're not available at the moment. So at the beginning of this year, I was like, I'm going to really discipline myself and it's going to be all about Bhakti Club. I'm just going to only sell Bhakti Club, Bhakti Club, Bhakti Club, Bhakti Club, which is my membership. I haven't done a single launch yet. I've been so busy with other things like this and India trip and I don't know, just all the shiny objects. It's great. My business is going really well. It's making money, but I know if I practice what I preach and just focus in on one thing and really focus on it and really build it, that's actually a strong foundation for a business. So And for every offering that you have, this is really important. For every offering you have, you need the pathway. So if I'm running my Ayurveda Goddess training, I need an Ayurveda pathway bringing people in. If I'm running a prenatal training, I need a prenatal pathway. They're different people. If I'm running a business training, different pathway. India retreat, different pathway. The pregnant ladies aren't coming to India in January. You know, it's like you need the different pathways. So you yes, have more than one thing, but then you've got to build out another free opt-in, another low cost offer, another pathway for them. More work. Diane's saying, I haven't run any programs as yet. Is there a turning point when you feel your skill set allows more income? I always struggle with increasing later when I'm more experienced. Yeah, I love that question. And what I want to say, Diane, is it's really, really easy to bring your prices down and it's really hard to put them up. So if you come in too low, it's very hard to then step into what you feel that you're worth. Better to come in a touch higher and then discount. And you'll know if you're feeling that your prices are inflated because the tendency to want to discount will arise in you a lot. Like if you're feeling like, oh, I want to give, you constantly want to discount people, sometimes that can be because the alignment isn't quite right with what you're charging. But I encourage you not to come in too low. I encourage you to work on your self-worth, work on your confidence, and come in at a place that feels fair, that feels like fair compensation for your time and energy. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Kaz.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to share an experience of mine when I was jumping up with my weekend retreats in price pointing. And I was taking it from a 2-night retreat. The cost was about, I think it ranged between, at the time, $700 and $950, perhaps whether you were twin share or single. And I found a venue that was really beautiful that I wanted to try. It was much more upmarket, and it meant that the prices would go, up into that kind of, I think the base price was $995, the top price was $1,495. And I remember being really nervous about it because it seemed like such a big jump, for 2 nights. It was much more luxurious accommodation. It was a beautiful, beautiful place. And I remember talking to a friend of mine who's not into the yoga world, not into the retreat world, but definitely in the business world. And he said to me at the time, he said, what are you going to lose from putting it out there? He said, because you might just sell it out, but you might not. And if you don't, you cancel it and you don't do it. And sometimes, and I did put it out there and it did sell out and it was very successful and it was all great. But just the fact that I knew that, I can put an offering out into the world and not everything is going to be absolutely spot on all the time. Not everyone's going to receive it, but it was just a lesson for me to sit back and think, yeah, I can put it out there. I can test the water. And if I don't get the people, then I can cancel it. That's my decision. I can say, you know what, I didn't quite hit the mark with that. But the experience I got out of just sort of taking that step of, taking a deep breath and going, you know what, I'm just going to put it out there and see what happens. And then, yeah, it was hugely successful anyway. And then it really gave me an in into, I guess, people's capacity, what they'll pay for a 2-night retreat. But the lesson of it's okay to put something out there and then cancel it. Not that I had to do it, but that mindset of failing kind of dissolved at that point. I gave myself the freedom to fail, not necessarily fail, but just to maybe
to experiment, to play.
Experiment.
There's this beautiful Sanskrit word Leela, which I named my daughter after, which is the cosmic play. What if we could see our businesses as just, Gemma, freedom to fail, just a play, and this is what I'm getting at when I say your business isn't you. It's like you can let it go and still be an amazing, incredible human. And you can and it works the other way too. Like if you have a very successful business or you happen to be very wealthy, that does not make you a better person than anyone else. It just means you have some karma around wealth and success in that particular realm. It's we get to just play and be in the cosmic play. And yeah, things come and go. And the thing is that you never see no one advertises the things that didn't work out. So, you can just quietly slide away, as Rachel said, so many offerings that dissolved over the years. It's totally fine. It is what it is. And everyone always talks about their successes and very little about their failures. But if you're putting yourself out there, you're going to have things that don't work out. And sometimes, I'll just say this too, sometimes you play with something, you put it out there, you're like, oh, let's just see if this comes, if this works. I'm not sure. And it doesn't. And you're like, okay, I tried, right? If it's in your heart to do something, if you feel a passion and a yearning and a calling, then you just keep going until you get it right. So maybe you have to do a slightly different iteration, or you have to word it slightly differently, or you have to, but there's also a place for persistence and a place for like, I am going to birth this thing. I feel like that about my books. Writing books does not make money unless you're Elizabeth Gilbert or Glennon Doyle or something like that. And it's a lot of time, it's very labor intensive. And yeah, it's a passion project for me. It's a labor of love. But all the books I've written have been part of my heart just needing to come out into the world. And I can't tell you how many times I've been rejected by publishers, like so many times. And also even my most recent publisher initially rejected me and said, no, this isn't for us. Thank you very much. And I wrote back to her and I said, thank you for taking the time to write to me, because many don't. They just, you just never hear back. And I said, could you tell me what is it about the book proposal that is a no? Like, it would be so helpful if you could give me 2 minutes of your time to just tell me why it's rejected. And she very kindly came back and said, it's this, it's this, it's this, it's this. And then I sat and thought about that. And I was like, actually, none of those things are important. That I can still write the book. And, like she didn't like my title, for example. I can modify. And so I wrote back to her and I was like, well, what if it was changing this way, changing that way, this, that, that. And we went back and forth, back and forth. And eventually she commissioned me. So a no isn't necessarily always a no. Sometimes if there's something, if you're like, I want to make this course, how you can really tell, and I'm sure you've had examples of this in your life, all of you, is where you have the feeling of, I want to make the thing even if no one buys it, even if no one comes, even if just one person came. It's in me to do this thing. They're often the things that end up being the best things you ever do. And I can also tell you in my own business, having been in this business for a long time and done what I do for a long time, some of the best things I've ever taught have been small numbers and haven't made me loads of money. And some of the things I've had lots of people and they've made me lots of money, I've enjoyed and I've been very happy to do them, but I haven't passionately loved them. I ran a training earlier this year called Yoni Codes, which is a bit of a kooky training that I put together that I feel like a lot of people didn't really get it. Like, it didn't sell particularly well. It was, honestly, I had 6 women in the end. It was one of the best things I've ever taught. Like, it was so the right 6 women at exactly the right time. I was so passionate about what I was like, it was just actually a career highlight for me, literally. And 6 women, definitely not the most lucrative thing I'll do this year. Probably just about broke even by the time of all the money and in pulling it all together and the time and energy. But like, so good for my soul and so part of my life's work. So some things, sometimes there's low hanging fruit and money is available and it's easy and easeful and lucrative, and that's wonderful. And sometimes it's you do it because you really want to do it and it doesn't matter how much income it comes. What you don't want to be doing is the thing that doesn't pay well that also doesn't light you up. That's where there's a problem. If it feels like a slog, if it feels like draining and it's not well paid, that's the stuff that you cull. And you cull it trusting that better things are around the corner. And another thing that's happened to me a lot in my life is I've given up something before I've really known how I would replace that income. I'm sure many of you have had this experience too. And when you give it up and you say no more, somehow magically the universe aligns and that income gets filled with something else. Because when you say no to the thing that isn't aligned, the universe, Krishna's grace just gives you what you need. It really does work like that. If you need to leave, we're on time. It's totally fine. I'm not offended at all if anyone needs to leave, but I'm also very happy to do a couple more comments or questions if anyone would like to. Yeah, Chrissy.
Sorry, just going back to the other comment. I know I'm not going to do one offering, and we've already got a million offers. I mean, talking about like wasting time, I do feel like there's some things that, like the one-on-one naturopath consults, I feel like there's a lot of energy, a lot of research, a lot of case studies afterwards. So I spend a lot more than that hour and a half with them. So doing group programs is something where I feel like I can reach more people and it might manage my time more. So I guess I am trying to move into, as we said before, about collaborating a lot of my offerings into one space with an online container. I guess once that one online container started and it's a bit more is going and I'm repeating it, then there's more space for me to potentially do other offerings. I just find it hard because I've got the perimenopause, I've got the yoga teach trainings, the subscriptions, it's like, do I just try to plan a timeline for them and start to look at the pathways and things like that? Is that
I think your first job for you specifically, your first job is to cull whatever you can. Clear the space. It's like a declutter, and it's hard because some of it will be things that do make you a bit of money and you do enjoy, but to be able to really focus, it's like it's a decluttering process. We have to do that. Those of you who are established and been going for a while and you've got lots of fingers in lots of pies, a declutter is really powerful. It really realigns your energy.
in group classes is my main thing, and I'll still continue teaching face to face.
Yeah.
I might be able to cut some of those back, but
Look at the things that you enjoy the least that make you the least money, and they're the ones that have to go first, and then also look at, you can sometimes de declutter things by changing. So let's say, for example, with your one-to-one naturopathy, if you did a price increase, a significant price increase on that, you'd probably have less clients. So, but you'd also make the same amount of money. And so it would declutter it to an extent because you'd be saying, well, actually, this isn't a high volume mid price thing. This is a low volume higher price thing. So if there's something like that you want to do less of, but you don't want to let it go completely, upping the price is definitely an option. Another option, maybe for Chrissy or maybe for some others, is to consolidate. So if you're running something and you're doing it every week and it hardly makes any money and not that many people come, well, what if you just did it monthly? Same number of people or more people, but like the same income. So sometimes you can consolidate by putting prices up. Sometimes you can consolidate by doing, not canceling completely, but doing it less often. And sometimes you just have to say, for now, I'm pressing pause on this thing because I need to make space for this other thing.
Beautiful. I also had a few questions around more technical Instagram stuff. Is that something we're going to cover, or
That's going to be the Shakti Creative Sessions with Edwina. Has she granted you access already?
No.
No, okay, so I'll make sure that happens. I'll text her now and make sure she gets, and then all the Instagram stuff that's a whole other beast.
Yeah, cool. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Again, feel free to leave if you need. I'm not offended. Diane.
I've got a question about.
Oh, Rachel,
sorry.
Rachel. No, Rachel, you go.
Just about the free offering and then the launch. So with my membership, in terms of time frame, because I guess I've been running a lot of mid-range, low-range offerings in, with chanting courses and that for some time. And then, I want to launch the membership for seasoned yoga teachers. I'm just kind of curious about that timeline. I was thinking of starting the membership not till the 1st of June. And then so
I think 1st of June will be perfect because you'll actually be following the pathway of this business training now to be really ready to launch by then. But what you want to be doing now is really warming up your audience. Something's coming. Something's coming. I'm working on this. That's huge. If you've got an established audience, it's not so relevant if you don't. If you've got an established audience, really start warming them up now and like piquing their interest. And then big launch strategy, I would say a month is what I tend to work with, and we'll go through the steps of that in a lot more detail in upcoming sessions. Like we're gonna, once we've got pyramid and pricing sorted out, then we get into launching. So it's definitely coming. But you'd want to be thinking about, pardon?
The free offering, when would you, like if you're going to launch or open the doors on the 1st of June, when would you offer the free offering?
Is the free offering going to be live?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would do it a month before.
Okay.
or
Yeah.
3 weeks. Depends how much intensity you like. I'm pitter,
Yeah.
so I like high intensity. So I tend to do 3 weeks and then I really go for it. You probably
I think if
noticed
it's
that with
too
my
long, it would be hard
marketing.
to keep going. Maybe I
Right.
burn out,
But some
like,
people who are a bit more kappa, they prefer they find the intensity too much. They prefer a longer launch. I just burn out. I'm like, I want to go for it.
I'm CAFA, but I think I just find that too many more emails to stay in touch and
Yeah, 3 weeks is
great.
perfect for me. Yeah, no worries. Diane, did you want to say something?
Oh, hi. Yeah, I just wanted to comment. I liked what you said about making it seem like play when you like, especially me, I'm quite literally starting right from the very beginning. I'm just done all the courses and I'm launching myself out there, which is quite a big leap of faith. And turning it into a game actually makes it, to me, it makes it more or less scary. And yeah, so I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, beautiful.
Really appreciate that.
Thank
I'm
you.
just getting splashed by dogs at the lake, which is pretty much in tune with play.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Diane.
Thanks.
Yeah, we can take it all very, very seriously. When you're at the beginning, the very beginning too, the truth is not that many people are looking. So, you get to do things and like slightly mess it up or wish you'd done it different. I still do it all the time. There's so many things in my business that I think, oh, I would have done that differently, or that wasn't the best, or, and then there's other things that I just celebrate and think that was so incredible and I'm so glad. And it's just life, it's just life. And we have to just not be so, the most important thing is that you don't then attach that to your sense of self-worth or self-esteem, because the two things are not the same thing. And I think that's where the fear of failure comes in, is when we start to feel like it is a representation of us as people. And when you really let that go, you become a lot less scared. Yeah, beautiful. Let's take one last person. One last question or share. Anyone? Are we complete? Okay. For now, we are complete. Thank you, ladies. Another great session. Keep in touch. I am so, so open to you emailing me, WhatsApping me, reaching out, asking for support, running an idea past me. I am available for that. So please don't hesitate. And of course, we've also got the group chat. And I know that you guys are doing some really beautiful work with Edwina now on all of your branding, and you're really feeling into the feeling and the mood of the businesses that you're creating. So we're trucking along nicely. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.